Yes, sir.
The mic is yours, JJ.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to give you a brief overview of the recent State Board item announcement as it relates to the Long Lease Commitment Grant. As you may or may not know, this grant was recently allocated and awarded to our system in the area of $5 million. We did reserve $100,000 so we can request some administrative support here at the system office as we are getting into the reporting as well as monitoring requirements. And this grant is really specified for you all to utilize these funds for any underserved student population in the two areas of advising and outreach. The project itself is designed with, or should be designed with, equity in mind. We have some research questions or some questions in the application that are going to be geared toward what population you are deciding to utilize, as well as what strategies you're going to be implementing.
Forces her to quit her jobs and go on disability.
Just a reminder to mute yourself.
It makes it even harder for her to.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And if you have not seen the State Board item on the next slide here, we will show you how to navigate to it on our system office website. And so if you open up ncommunitycolleges.edu, in the very top right menu bar, there will be a State Board. Click on that. It'll bring you to the State Board page. You click on the most recent date, which is February 18th in this case. Click on the Finance tab. And then the document is FC01. Now, will also be a link to this document in the chat if you just need quick reference to it. But if you want to know how to navigate to it on your own, that is how you find it. And Dr. Kelly, did you want to give an overview of this State Board item?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So when you see the State Board item, and we will send out this slide deck, and as a part of the slide deck, we can send out the item as well. So that way you will have it in an email. And as we kind of said at the beginning, we're recording this, so we can have a recording link out there for you guys as well. So this is coming from federal monies going through the legislation. And has come to us, and that legislation is in the State Board Code if you want to research that and look more into it. It does have a matching requirement. And so the matching requirement will be similar to what we did with the GEARS money and the support services grant that some of every college is participating in. And that is based upon your presidential category. And so there's 3 different categories there based upon your college FTE. And so for those, you can see, I don't need to read this to you, you can see it, what the matching requirements will be. And that'll be exactly the same as the Student Support Services Grant. Slide. And so we thought that advising and outreach was a little broad and wasn't defined in the legislation or the State Board Code, or not State Board Code, but the State Board item. And so JJ, go ahead with the definitions.
So we try to really approach both of these topics as broad as possible. And so under advising, you'll see the definition that we gave here. Really, we want you all to think outside of the box as it relates to all things that relate to advising and outreach. One thing of note that we did include in the slide, but was included in our presentation to the State Board and the State Board item, was that we use the Perkins definitions of special populations as sort of the baseline of any of the populations that you can designate this money or any project towards. And so as you are thinking of what type of work you would like to engage in, what type of things you would like to do in the category of advising and our outreach. We're using the Perkins 5 special populations sort of as the foundational definitions for the populations that you can outreach to.
And if I could build on that a little bit, JJ.
Sure.
So that is really important because we know that each of the colleges and your community, your underserved population is going to look completely different. And so using whatever data and resources and information you have, we know that that's going to look very different at Tri-County than it might at Montgomery, that it might at Wake Tech, and it might look at College of the Albemarle. So we really want you to take a look and a deep dive of what that underserved population is for your college and for your community.
Here you'll find what we believe will be the tentative application questions that will be forthcoming. The application process has not been finalized because we haven't received the final reporting and or monitoring requirements that are going to be given or are passed down to us from various state agencies. And so these are the questions we believe will be in the final application. We want to make sure that we share those with you so you all can begin working on, I won't say application because the money has been allocated to each of the colleges should you choose to opt in and engage in the work. And so really this is for reporting and monitoring on our end, as well as providing information that is being asked of us in terms of how colleges are utilizing these funds. And of course, a key question is here, the source of matching funds. If your institution has a required match, we do need to have that indicated, and it cannot be in, Dr. Kelly, there's nuance to this. So Dr. Kelly may have to explain it. It cannot be other state funds, correct?
That is correct. It cannot be state funds. Some federal funds may, and see that may is underlined, italicized, and bold, may be able to be used for this, but you would have to check with those requirements from that federal funding. For example, WIOA would not be eligible to be used for this. So is that where you wanted me to go, JJ?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And really the last thing we definitely wanted to share with you all before we received your questions was about monitoring and reporting. There are a number of entities in which we'll be reporting back to just because of the source of fundings being passed down through multiple entities. And so although the allocation is there and is ready to go, until we have the final reporting requirements and monitoring plan, we did not want to open up the application process because we wanted to ensure that you weren't signing up for something that was unintended, or we didn't want to have a gotcha at the end of the application process. So we want to have those requirements out there first and finalized before opening up the application process to you.
And thank you, JJ. I agree 100%. And so we wanted to make sure that you knew that, one, we were moving on this project. And secondly, we wanted you to understand what our thinking was as far as those questions for the request for funding process. So you could go ahead and begin thinking through that. Who is your underserved population? What are the needs? What data do you have available? Those types of things. If you have questions as you and your teams are thinking through those things, please don't hesitate to contact either JJ or myself. We'll be happy to talk you through it. If you submit your request for funding and we look at the budget or look at the questions and we feel like it needs a little more, then it will become a conversation about how we can get what we need up here for reporting and documentation purposes and allow you to continue to move forward with your project that's going to meet the needs of your students. So that monitoring, I want to make one more comment about that. We're expecting that monitoring and reporting may be a little more intensive than what we saw with the Student Support Services grant. So you're currently using that Student Support Services grant, and it's a monthly report and a semester report, and it's really pretty simple. We're expecting that NC Pro, and because of the source of the federal funds, that we're expecting that there'll be more stringent reporting and potential monitoring along with that as well. So again, we didn't want to surprise you, and we wanted to give you time. We wanted to make sure we knew what our obligations and responsibilities were before we opened up application, and that's why there's a little bit of a delay at this point.
We already see a question in the chat here. To apply for these funds, must your institution have a decrease in enrollment? That answer, that is false. So any institution can apply for these funds regardless of whether your enrollment has increased or decreased over the past 2 years or as it relates to the impact of COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question. And I want to reiterate, we have Gilda Revilla Fest on the line, and I'm glad you're here, Gilda. And so she just reiterates that that Title II funds may not be used as a matching source for this grant. Do we have any other questions? If you, I kind of would like to keep it in the chat for right now, just because it's easier for us to document and to capture those questions. And we may not even know the answers to all of those questions. But we definitely would like to hear your questions. As far as the Title III funding, we have that question. I don't know for sure, so that's something that we'll have to mark down to research. And I'd encourage you to do the same. I don't know for sure if the Title III funds could be used as a match. You want to take the next one, JJ?
Yes, sorry. Yes,
right.
So the next question here is, in the definition of advising that was provided, technology, what type of technology and for who? And this ties into Hyro's question as well. This is open to all types or all student populations across your institution. In terms of technology, that could be onboarding, it could be outreach, it could be, I guess, something more intensive, like I know some colleges are exploring like CRMs or other management tools if you wanted to veer in the technology space. I think it could be early alert platforms, et cetera. And so I think we've been given a very broad definition, and we want to make sure that we're not putting any handcuffs to that definition outside of the state or federal requirement.
Yeah, the key will be your connection to the population that you've identified. You'll want to make sure that it can be served, and then of course there'll be outcome measures to show that that service has been impactful. And then Kim, your question about Perkins 5 special populations versus underserved populations. Yeah, I know that those aren't equal or synonymous definitions. We were trying to give ourselves a definition that was already in place and accepted at all the colleges instead of creating a new definition. So that's why we chose the Perkins 5. And plus, the Perkins 5 is pretty broad and kind of breaks the thinking when you think about underserved. For example, our students with disabilities, many times they are overlooked in these kind of projects, and it could be that on your campus that students with disabilities is the area where you see the most need and therefore need some resources. So that was kind of our thinking there. I hope that answered your question, Kim. Joanne, I guess I'm taking your question. JJ paused there. The question is, can these funds be used to continue a grant funded position that is coming to an end, or does it need to be a brand new position? If it's a grant, I think the way we did it with the Student Support Services grant was that if the position was ending because funding was going to cease, then that was not interpreted to be a problem. However, if it's a state-funded position or it is a reoccurring position and you just want to move the money from one place to another and use these funds, then that would not be appropriate.
In terms of the allocation, so more details regarding the allocation is actually in the legislation. So the allocation must be encumbered by December 31st of 24, but funding can go through 2026. And it could be spent all in one shot, or institutions can break that up as needed if there are annual or yearly contracts that need to be paid for whatever project or initiative that the institution is engaging in.
And so that kind of goes with your question, Michael, about your budget. Your budget can be similar to what it was you have the same freedom similarly that you had with the Student Support Services grant. So if you want to spend, your budget would have you spending all the money at the front end or spread out throughout the whole time period or mainly at the back end. Either of those would be acceptable. And yes, we are going to share the slides and the recording.
Dr. Kelly, will you take the HERF matching question?
Yes, that's like the Title III. We're going to have to double check on both of those. I would hate to misspeak and give you misguidance. Since the source of these funds are different than the Student Support Services grant, I think it would be important just to double check that HERF can be used. So qualifying or eligible matches could be other well, institutional funds, of course. I think that if you could get some county funds, if you could get some, I don't want to say potentially, you'd have to check with Golden Leaf to see if maybe they would be willing to sponsor you. You'd have to write a grant for that. Those are the sources that come to my mind right away.
The question regarding purchasing technology for a student as opposed to the institution, I believe that answer is also yes. So I guess in an example, if you were thinking of purchasing laptops so that students could check those out for textbooks, and you're using paying for textbooks as a way to outreach to an underserved population. Obviously, that's something that's directly for the student, but in that instance, the institution would retain the laptop or equipment under its ownership. So yes and yes.
So we kind of have a pause here in the chat. So while people are typing or thinking of other questions, I did notice that Dr. Gold was on the line, or at least she was. Dr. Gold, do you have any thoughts or any comments that you would like to share with the group? I'm putting my boss on the spot, which is not always a good thing to do.
Well, and I apologize, I had my camera off because I have the sun coming in the window and it's blinding me. So I'll try to get out of the sun and close enough to the computer where you can hear me. But thank you for the webinar. I know, JW, you and I talked a little bit about the reporting requirements, and we are working through that this week to try to get more guidance on that. We do want you to be aware of what those reporting requirements might be so that you can plan accordingly. So this is a different source of funds, and the requirements for reporting are different than previous federal funds that have come to us. So we are working through that guidance and hope to get back to you very soon. But thank you for joining us today, and hopefully this money will be helpful in supporting your students.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gold. We appreciate that, and thanks for being here and all your support. to get through this process. We'll pause here to see if there's any other questions. Please feel free at this time. I guess we can open things up, open the mic and the chat box, either way, because some of you may be on the telephone. So a question from Kim here about identifying non-traditional adult students as an unrepresented group or population. I think if you can define that group, and then you have evidence that that group is not being served at your institution because of whatever reasons, then I think that would not be too broad. Terry asked the question whether or not you could hire an administrative support staff. First, you would want to make sure it's a new position. And then second is we need to look at the monitoring and reporting requirements to make sure that it's direct services that have to be funded, or whether or not it could be indirect services. Because to me, an administrative support staff would be more indirectly serving students. And so Terry, I would kind of want us to wait a little bit to see what those monitoring and reporting requirements are. And that goes back to Amy's question, indirect costs, would that be allowable? And if not, can we match our federal negotiated rate? That's something, Amy, we would have to investigate more. We'll make sure we capture that and try to have an answer for you when the request for funding process opens. So I'm going to mispronounce your name. I think it's Joseph. The question about using these monies to pay outstanding balances or books or fees, cost of attendance type of things. I think, JJ, do you know if we looked into that or not? I saw you shaking your head.
We asked that question. I don't know if we received a definitive answer. And so that's something that we'll have to get back on, as well as another question that has come up before, and it relates to outreach, and sometimes outreach equals advertising. And that's also a question that we are wanting to make sure we get in writing as it relates to institutions maybe exploring that type of work.
All right. Thank you, JJ. And we appreciate you guys using the chat, because that helps us better capture the questions to make sure we're getting the right answers for you guys when things open up. Okay, I don't think we have any more. Oh, there we go. Another one from Sabrina. In terms of outreach, does that equal the recruitment of special populations? I would interpret recruitment activities the same as outreach. Pause just a little longer. And JJ, can you talk a little bit about the funding question there?
Yes, so all the funding has to be earmarked locally by 2024, but essentially funding could extend through 2026 should you wish to break it up in recurring amounts or spend it more slowly over time. And yes, there will be an application process when we receive sort of the final go-ahead from the monitoring and reporting. We will have a small application process really to outline those questions that we shared earlier. There may be one or two additional questions depending on feedback that we receive. And then we want to give as quick a turnaround to awards or ensuring that allocations are sent to colleges in a timely fashion. Initially, we had a timeline, but we didn't want to share it because the monitoring and reporting question just inserted complications, and we wanted to make sure that we could outline the process, exactly what needs to be done and taken care of once everything was finalized.
Yeah, and when you think about an application process here, don't think about a master's thesis or dissertation. For one thing, JJ and I don't want to read all of those. For the other is I don't think it's applicable to this process. So, it'll be a couple of pages answering the questions, providing your evidence and data, and then also, of course, your budget. I see that Dr. Brown has joined us. He's the Chief Academic Officer here. Dr. Gold is the Chief of Staff. Dr. Brown, do you have anything you want to share with us before we come to a close?
No, thank you and JJ for offering this session, and looking forward to, I don't have anything to add, but just like Dr. Gold said, we do hope that these funds will help the colleges really support their students and take things to the next level, as we know that our students have many needs. But thank you all for offering this session. Great job.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brown. We'll pause just a little bit longer to see if there's any last minute questions. And just a reminder that if you inevitably you turn off the screen and the mic and then you end up with questions and you're thinking, oh no, I didn't ask, don't hesitate to shoot either myself or JJ an email, and we'll do our best to get the answers to those questions. And so when we send out this, the link to the recording and to the slides, we'll be able to, you can respond to that with any questions that you might have. Well, I'd like to end with, and I don't know if JJ has any closing comments. I have to be honest that when I saw this legislation come through, and then I saw where the intention was of the legislation, I became excited. I don't think personally that we have been able to provide as much funding as we would like to for under our underserved populations, and that's our mission in the community colleges, is to reach those who are unlikely to be reached. And so I'm excited to see that there's monies going into this area. Of course, if I was going to dream, it would be about triple of what we have. However, we did get some money for this effort, and I'm excited about it. And I know Dr. Evans is as well as Dr. Gold and Dr. Brown. So we look forward to hearing some very creative and innovative ideas and projects of how you can serve those students in your communities. And we hope to also then hear some great outcomes about how those students have been successful. So with that being finished, unless JJ has any closing comments.
One question that has already come up is, can these funds be used to target students who are leads or prospects? And that answer is yes. They don't always have to be your quote unquote customer. If you're looking to increase your outreach to a certain demographic or zip code or population in your local community that you wish you always had funds to do so, you could potentially use these funds for that type of work. And I'll end like I always do. Thank you for everything that you do for our students and our system. Please continue to take care and stay safe.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Evans. And we'll stop the recording now, and you guys have a great afternoon.